Yu-sung woke up after the battle, groggy and confused. He saw Master Mapung standing over him, looking annoyed. "It was a pain to drag you out here," Mapung said. "How did you even manage to fall asleep as soon as you laid down?" Yu-sung glanced over at Gihu, who was performing lunges while holding his ears. Then he looked back at his mission panel and realized that his mission status was still the same. He thought he could just beat the other kid and be done with the mission. But before he could even finish his thought, his master pinched his ears and dragged him over to Gihu. Then they were both ordered to do 100 laps around the training ground, duck walking the whole time. Gihu was relieved that Yu-sung was okay after he saw him pass out, but Yu-sung said it was no big deal and that it was all thanks to Gihu. Yu-sung asked Gihu how many laps he had done, and Gihu said he had only done 10. Then Yu-sung asked Gihu if he wanted to make a bet. Yu-sung says he's all good and was surprised to realize that his mission is still not over. A while later, Yu-sung's movements were getting increasingly heavy and also the gap between him and Gihu. And during his training, a message suddenly popped up telling him that his stats have improved a bit after he drained all of his stamina. He quickly regains all his energy and proceeds to take over Gihu's lead as Master Mapung watches over them and is left wondering if this is even a punishment for them. Shortly after the race, Yu-sung lost the bet, and in a moment when he failed the mission, he lost his mind and fainted again. He was worried that people would make fun of him for being a wimp. Then he figured that all the excessive physical training must be paying off, because a message popped up in his face telling him that he'd gained some strength. He wondered what was going on and if he'd have to keep doing this forever. Chion's Soso appeared out of thin air and asked Yu-sung if he was done with his training. She had come to see the top students who hadn't attended class yet, and she wondered if he was in trouble. He looked flustered as he confirmed her assumption. Chion's Soso told him not to look at her so much, or he'd ruin her beauty, but Yu-sung told her that she was just blocking the sun. Yu-sung felt like a total creep when he couldn't help but stare at her beauty. Chion's Soso told him not to fall for her because she was already engaged, but Yu-sung got defensive and said he wasn't interested in her at all. He heard that she was engaged, so he asked her if it was someone from the Sekiendang clan, but she says that it was nothing but rumors. This clan is one of the MURIM's 5 prestigious family generations, but it was totally destroyed by the Sato Jesuits a few years later. Yu-sung felt bad for Chion's Soso because he knew she was about to go through a lot in the future. She hated that she had to be part of a political marriage. He figured that if she hadn't been forced to marry into the Sekiendang clan, she would have turned out to be a much different person. He soon ditched that idea and focused on himself instead, trying to figure out what was going on in his life with all the mysterious things that kept happening to him. Yu-sung thought that getting into Cheonbong Academy wasn't enough for him. He wanted to aim even higher. He kept staring at Chion Soso's back as she walked away, and then he saw a stat under her level that showed her age. Yu-sung's stat system informed him that his third eye of wisdom skill had reached level 2. He was surprised by this, as he had only just used it to look at Chion Soso. As he gained more abilities, their proficiency increased along with his level. Yu-sung figured he could still level up his skills by working hard, even though he failed the mission and didn't get the reward. Then Chion Soso turned around and told him and Gihu to go to the mentor's office. Yu-sung looked around for Gihu, but Chion Soso told him he was just chilling on a tree branch. Later, outside the office, Yu-sung saw Chion Taegong in the same room as Master Mapung. Yu-sung tried looking at their statuses, but all he could see were their names. He'd heard that the worst thing that could happen to you at school was to get yelled at by Chion Taegong himself. Chion Taegong was disappointed to find out that 2 of his students were late to school, and not only that, but they'd also gotten into a fight. So as punishment, the teacher made them do 500 laps of duck walks. After that, they could go home. He asked them if they'd ever be late again, and they both promised they wouldn't. Then they were told to leave the room and do their assigned work. But before Yu-sung left, Chion Taegong told him to report back to the office the next day. Yu-sung left with a dead look in his eyes as he thought he got off easy that time. Chion Taegong was fascinated in their batch as Master Mapung hoped that they wouldn't bring them any trouble at all. Later, Yu-sung arrived at the training field and saw that it was empty. In his past life, he had only been allowed to train in certain areas of the field, since you had to be an official student and a direct disciple to use the whole thing. As Yu-sung picked up the wooden sword, he thought about how important it is to start training in martial arts at a young age. He knew that if you miss your chance to start training early, you'll never be as good as you could have been. So he was determined to make the most of his opportunity and become a great martial artist. And once they miss the opportunity, no matter how good they are, they'll always be at the bottom of society. But as soon as he started training, his sword skills and stamina shot up. As long as he keeps at it, he'll be strong. Later that night, a group of students came to the training field and saw Yu-sung training there. One of them asked him why he was there and what he was doing with his self-proclaimed wooden sword. Before that night, Yu-sung remembered a time when a group of bullies picked on him and put him on the ground. This man is known as Gong Jindo, which we will refer to as Jindo from now on. He told him that he should start listening to him from now on. Yu-sung called him his big brother, and he asked him if it really was a big deal to him. Jindo rolled his eyes and told his buddy Sancheol to keep an eye out. Then he started beating Yu-sung up, telling him that he doesn't have the right to call him his big brother. After recalling a memory, Yu-sung looked at the sword's grip and saw that Jindo's name was embedded on it. It didn't even cross his mind for a second that he was picking out Jindo's sword. Jindo found out that Yu-sung got first place on the entrance exam, so he asked the emo kid where he was from. The kid said he was just from MURIM. Then he told him to put down the wooden sword he was holding. He stopped them and said, "Let's keep it down. Chion Taegong is watching." Sure enough, in the distance, Chion Taegong was standing on a balcony in a tower, looking down at them. Jindo was stunned to see this man watching over the newcomer in the middle of the night. He wondered who this guy was. Then he mocked Yu-sung for not having any special place in the clan, and told him he didn't want to talk to people like him. He leaned in and told the country boy to remember where he came from, in case he didn't know already. Yu-sung said he did know, but he wanted to try anyway. After a short talk, Yu-sung excused himself and left Jindo alone in the training field. He was pissed when he saw the scratches on his sword that Yu-sung left. Before the sun even came up, Yu-sung was wide awake in his dorm, unable to sleep. He then told a story about a time when the Cheonbang Martial Arts School was the biggest and most prestigious school in MURIM. Back then, novices from the 9 faction secondary schools and the children of the many famous MURIM masters would come to study there. A lot of the group cut ties with the family and refused their help. Some of them were recognized for their skills despite the immense support they received, and were either admitted early or were certain to pass. Gong Jindo started school a year early and was made the head of the Cheonbang clan. Yu-sung declared him the strongest student at that point. Yu-sung couldn't sleep because he was overthinking Jindo's earlier provocation. Even though he's ranked high, his poor status means he can't get along with anyone. He wondered how Giho had dealt with guys like Jindo in the past, and figured it must have been because he proved himself. Yu-sung knew he wasn't as strong as Giho, but he was determined to prove it by training hard and getting stronger. After his legs gave out, he decided to train in secret in the field. Later, Yu-sung went to see Giho and stare at him in disbelief when he saw that Giho's level had gone up even higher than he expected. He wondered how he could ever close the gap between their powers. Then at Master Mapung's room, he was told that there was no other way but to increase his own strength. He went on to explain that the difference in strength also affects speed and defense. He told him that the way to overcome the size difference is to bulk up, either with muscle or fat. He added that there's another way to increase your strength, and that's to learn your opponent's martial arts techniques so you can exploit their weaknesses. That information really stuck with him. He was then asked if he wanted to beat Gihu using those methods. He told him that he enjoyed the fight they had yesterday. He saw a lot of mistakes in the fight, but he was sure that he could win at some point if he could just learn from one thing. And that is to learn how to master his spiritual energy, which Master Mapung will be teaching him. After Master Mapung promised to train Yu-sung on his Gi Ascension techniques, they started the training by having Yu-sung balance a bucket of water above his head, while he held his squat with a stick in front of him. He's currently training his inner gi, which was the bare minimum for the ascension techniques. While Master Mapung explains that this test of endurance is ideal for his body, Yu Sung's body starts to crack inside and a notification pops up beside him. It explains that he has already surpassed his physical limit, giving him bonus stats, which increased his vitality and gi by 1, and a bonus where his health heals him for 10%. Yu Sung realizes that the method he's currently doing is better, since his gi power is increasing more often than before. Master Mapung was amazed at Yu Sung's tenacity for enduring the method for 2 hours, since most disciples only end up within 30 minutes. Master Mapung knew that his method was perfect for Yu Sung, who gets stronger the more he gets beaten up. After a while, Master Mapung decided to move on to the next training method to test Yu Sung's combat power. But Yu Sung still hasn't had enough of the training since he wants to increase his gi furthermore. After relocating, Master Mapung demonstrates how to use the inner gi to further increase their power by destroying a helpless tree. Master Mapung explains that it was the power of the inner gi which exponentially increases with greater gi. Master Mapung tried to demonstrate what would happen if you were to put your inner gi into a single point, but he stopped, explaining to Yu Sung that it would be better if he saw someone around his age do the demonstration. Coincidentally, Chion Soso was near them, so Master Mapung calls out to her and instructs Chion Soso to show how to focus their inner gi. Chion Soso was confused on what to show, so Master Mapung instructed her to show Yu Sung the Chanbong technique, which was a piercing kick. Chion Soso excitedly agreed since she knew it was a chance to show off her skills in front of Yu Sung. So she questions Master Mapung where to demonstrate the skill, to which Master Mapung responded, in front of the big-ass rock. Chion Soso focuses her inner gi directly to her feet and begins to twirl midair to perform a perfectly executed piercing kick, which indeed did some damage to the rock. Yu Sung was surprised by the power and shockwave of Soso's kick, while Master Mapung was amazed at her since she might be able to break the boulder quite soon. Yu Sung was a bit hopeless since he knew he never got to learn any of the secret techniques, and the only move he learned from the academy was the So Chong sword style back in his past life. Luckily, he overheard both Chion Soso and Master Mapung talking about the Dragon Phoenix exam, where he knew that he still had a chance if he passed the exam, since the secret Chanbong techniques were only passed down to the main disciples who qualified. After the previous training, they move on to the wooden dummies. Master Mapung tells him to keep practicing for improvement, since Yu Sung must train harder if he wants to control his inner gi like Gihu or Soso. Yu Sung was unsatisfied with the results of his training, so Master Mapung advises him to not be impatient, and hands him a wooden sword to learn the way of the sword instead, since a weapon can help him control his gi much better than to control it with the body. Yu Sung takes a look at the sword and notices that it gives him +3 power and +1 gi, which can increase depending on the weapon's mastery. Yu Sung realizes the only reason a wooden sword increases his gi is due to him using his first ever technique with a sword in his past life. Afterwards, Soso informed Master Mapung that Yu Sung needs to be excused so he can come to the next class. After quite some time, class was done and Soso can be seen chatting with Yu Sung about the secret Chanbong techniques, which consisted of the sword, palm, fist, kick, and spear. But their conversation was interrupted when some goofy ass came in front of them to block their way. It was Gong Jindo with his crew. Yu Sung wasn't expecting this to happen, while Soso was confused why Jindo's with his gang. Jindo advises Soso to keep out of their business since his business is with Yu Sung. Jindo wanted to take a look at Yu Sung's skills before the both of them spar with each other. Yu Sung really didn't expect them to wait in the bamboo forest since he's on his way back to Master Mapung. Yu Sung noticed that Jindo's gang had already surrounded them, so he had no choice. He mocks Jindo by telling him that he must have prepared a lot just to greet him. Jindo smirks and retorts that his gang won't do anything but spectate. Suddenly, Jindo pulled out the "I please women in bed" move, and both Yu Sung and Soso were immediately alerted. In a split second, Soso managed to protect Yu Sung by using her safeguarding palm against Jindo's arm. Yu Sung thought what Jindo did was despicable, since he tried to pressure Yu Sung's lethal gi point or acupuncture point located in his upper abdomen, which can cause serious damage to him. Soso tells Jindo what he did was dangerous and could potentially kill Yu-sung. Jindo, in a disrespectful and mocking manner, explains that the best disciple, Yu-sung, shouldn't have any problem dodging it. Yu-sung got into position and thought that it would have ended badly if it weren't for Soso, so he was grateful. He also noticed Jindo wasn't hitting him as badly as he can, unlike in his previous life, which he came into a realization that Jindo must be feeling anxious. This realization made him toughen up since Jindo only knows that Yu-sung is the best disciple, but he's unaware of Yu-sung's skill level yet. Jindo was currently level 8, and he was looking down on Yu-sung, thinking that he must have realized that he can't do anything to escape. Suddenly, a mission panel pops up in front of Yu-sung, telling him to defeat Jindo Gong within a time limit of 15 minutes. The mission reward will be an increase in his agility by 1, while the mission punishment will be 0 initiative for an hour, meaning that he can't move within that certain time frame. Yu-sung was ready to fight Jindo since he can use the mission as leverage. Then he questions Jindo if he's gonna fight without a wooden sword. This question left Jindo confused, and Yu-sung invited him to spar with each other, right here, right now. Will Yu-sung be able to win now after his defeat against Gifu? Will our main character, Yu-sung, be able to beat the fuck out of him? No lie though, his character design is so good that it annoyed me while doing the script. Well, find out next time in part 3 of Infinite Leveling MURIM, which will come out next week. This is part 2 of the Manhwa Recap. If you've enjoyed, like, comment, and subscribe. Hope you all have a good day in peace.
Are we on trend? Huh? Why did you just moan in my ear?
Sorry, I was just...
Never do that shit again.